Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition live of Comic Watchers Presents. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm Cody, the content manager for www.comic-watch.com. With me, as always, is our editor-in-chief, Nick, coming straight
Hello.
from the heart of Texas. And we've got Sal Abbinanti with us today to talk about his new Kickstarter, The Hostage. Kickstarter went live yesterday. The book is already funded. So this is one you definitely need to be jumping on. For those of you who don't know Sal, why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself and your history in the industry?
I got into comics. I started in advertising, but I always wanted to be a comic artist, so I went into comics. Didn't work out as well as I wanted because my style was just not, what they were looking for. I started working with Alex Ross because we were friends. We worked in advertising together, and then I started repping him just as a favor, and that was 20 years ago. And then along the way, I met with Bill Sienkiewicz. So I've been repping Bill and Alex for about 20 years, and then but still doing the comic stuff, still doing my comic stuff at the same time. I did Atomica, God is Red was an indie book I did. I want to say about 6 years ago, and and Hostage is something that we just literally just dropped this week. So that's
So
my life.
with the hostage, and for everybody who's read the press release and all that stuff that we've been pushing, it's a 20-year project. This is something that you've been working on for a good long time.
Yeah.
I mean, when Pamela brought attention to it to us, she called it a dream project, which to us is incredibly exciting to hear about. Like these projects, you never know if they're going to get done, and then when they finally do get done, that excitement. So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about the process, like what took it so long, like how all that kind of came together.
Well, I started it when I was in college. I didn't. I mean, there were start stops. So the original couple of versions of it never really got anywhere because it was you guys. I date you guys by a lot. This was the late '80s and early '90s, and it never really came together because in those days there really was no small press. If you wanted to do a book, if you didn't print 100,000 copies, there were no printers that would print small press, and you'd have to do it black and white, and it just never came together. And then money is a thing, but it was something that always was in my head, and I carried it around because I spent some time in Rio, and some things you just can't unsee. So it was just something that I felt as an artist was always something that was necessary that I revisited. And when my art style landed and I was standing in all those portfolio lines and they were telling me how disturbing my work was, I realized the only way I was going to get into comics was if I self-published, because Marvel and DC were just having none of it. And I wanted to go in the front door. I wanted to draw Luke Cage and Devil Dinosaur and draw like John Buscema and Jack Kirby. It just didn't happen. So when the chance came about with COVID, even though I had been working on the Hostage ongoing, for a while, I thought this is perfect because I could reach the fans directly. I could get direct feedback, whether if they loved it or hated, because comics are tough. There's a lot of brand loyalty in comics. They're like, you want your Batman, you want your Wolverine, you don't want my character. And a lot of comic stores, unfortunately, don't buy a lot of indie books. They don't buy a lot of indie titles. So if you want to do it, you really got to do it yourself. And the last 10 years or so, I've kind of pushed it, but I have a family, you got kids, you got to eat 3 times a day. And when you're going to do an indie title, it's not exactly going to be a payday. You're not doing it to get an option by Hollywood, even though that's what a lot of people think. They think, hey, Netflix is going to make a series, Sal. And you're like, yeah, okay. But, that's not really your motivation, because if it is, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's so true, really. And the evolution of small press has kind of fueled that speculation. A lot of creators are doing this to get adapted into some type of other medium.
And that's okay, if that's their thing. But I mean, no offense to them, I think if that's your motivation, you're going down a dark hole. You know, 'cause I don't see that there's an end game there. You know, what your means of why you do this better be because you really, really want to do it. Because if you're an artist, you know that you're not going to get a lot of hugs and kisses from people, especially as you grow up. And there's not a lot of money in it. That shouldn't be. Let me back up. That shouldn't be your motivation is money, because there's so much sweat that has to be just you inside your head. That if you're waiting for pats on the back, it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if there are pats on the back or hugs and kisses to be given, like that's what we're here for, because we both love the book. I think it's
thank you. Wow, that's
outstanding.
great. Because I'll be honest, I haven't gotten any feedback from anybody.
Really?
Other than hey, it looks good, or looks crazy, or or wow, Sal, what happened? You get a lot of that. And I get that. I mean, I've got that about my work my whole life, so it's not like that's a big shock. But I didn't send the PDF to many people because it's a big file, and I like the textile feel of comics. I like the book in my hand. I like the comic in my hand. So I'm not a digital comics guy. I tried it many times. I just can't read comics online. I have to have the book in my hand. So I never assume anybody reads it when you send it to them. People lie to you and go, Sal, looks great, and the part with the little dog, and you're like, well, there's no dog in there, but okay.
That's so funny. We see that a lot, really. And I think it's really just outstanding work, because I've seen you talk a few times about sort of the visceral, raw feel of your artwork. And that seems to correlate really deeply with the themes and motives in the Hostage book that we see. And I wanted to see if you could kind of delve into the correlations and the parallels that we see in your visual execution, and also the themes that we see in the Hostage, and how they go hand in hand.
Well, there's really only one way that I could do it, and it was a little. It was tough. It was a tough subject to kind of deal with every day.
Yeah.
But my style kind of lended to. I learned. I think the thing I learned most growing up from Kirby was that comics should be a product of your imagination. They should really, it's why we draw so great as kids. Why do we draw great as kids and then we don't draw great as adults? Is that when you just draw a tree, you don't think about what does a tree look like. You just draw a tree. So working with Sienkiewicz over the years, I've kind of stolen the idea that let the work kind of be cerebral. Let it, just let what's going on and let the vibe of what you're after dictate the visual, not so much in your head where you're thinking, what's the editor going to want? Because when you're thinking what an editor is going to want, and you got an answer to a publisher, they're going to look at you and go, Sal, the narrative's too crazy. The narrative's too erratic. It's not linear storytelling. It's all over the place. But I didn't have to worry about that when I knew that it was my book and I was doing it. And I also, a lot of the stuff I saw in Rio really kind of, I never kind of got it out of my head. I mean, those kids, I still see those kids in my head. I mean, and so when I wanted to approach it, I knew like, look, man, I didn't want people to think, oh, great, he needed a narrative for a story, homeless kids in Rio. That was not my motivation. I mean, I did Atomica because that was my New Gods. I wanted to draw Thor. I wanted to draw New Gods. They were never going to let me do it. So I just said, I'll do my version of Thor in my head. And then, but with the Hostage, I thought, look, man, I'm not a kid anymore. If I'm going to do this, let me do it. And I really didn't expect to be talking with you guys on this. I thought I was going to put this out and it was going to be, but I needed to do it. I needed to put it out because, with the world the way it is now, I had a lot more time on my hands. I wasn't doing any more trade shows. So I had no excuse to not dive in.
You mentioned the nonlinear narrative, and I kind of wanted to circle back on that because that's what I do. I do narrative. That's everybody's supposed to drink every time I say narrative, or I'm
Right,
supposed to drink. I
right,
don't remember
right.
how it works, but but you mentioned that, and that one thing that I noticed specifically was that it comes at the story from three different narrative viewpoints. So you've got it opens the first chapter is the children, and then you actually slip into the viewpoint of the hostage,
Right.
this mythical god creation that feeds off the blood of the children, and I mean, just what a beautiful concept. And then it slides into your own perspective in the epilogue, where you kind of recap the story from your own eyes. To me, it had a feel of a book that's really trying to bring light to something. So I mean, like, what do you hope that people take away from the hostage?
I just, it was something that it still goes on. I was not trying to make a political statement, but I think, if you really want to get leverage on your work to approach anything, I don't know if you guys are artists or writers or you see you come across like you're artists, but to me, artists, whether you're an artist, a writer, an architect, a dancer, to me, it's all the same. It's a creative flow that you're after. But I just, I really felt it's important in comics now, especially to kind of to not be afraid to bring a new voice, to not be afraid to feel like, okay, this is what's selling. I better do it that way. I think whatever the next big thing is, or whatever the next way of doing things is, we don't know what it is yet. So I think as an artist, to get out, it's a struggle no matter what. It's going to be a kick in the ass and a pushing a rock up a hill no matter what. So if it's going to be a struggle, take a chance and do it yourself. So I felt that, look, I know it's going to be tough. And I showed it to some people a little bit along the way. And even Bill Sienkiewicz was like, Sal, a crazy narrative is okay. An eclectic narrative is okay, but you still need beats so people know what the hell is going on, even if it's crazy. So there were times that I amended where I was going with it because I felt, yeah, it looks cool, but if people don't know what the hell's going on, people don't know what the hell's going on. As a storyteller, you got to find that happy medium between I want to do my crazy shit and I want to tell a story. But with what I saw in Rio and how I felt about the kids in the favelas and everything else and what I kind of, experienced, I just felt that it fit. There were no straight lines. There were no straight perspectives. The favelas are all over the place. There were no right. Everything was all, it was kind of something out of a, Fellini meets Bambi kind of thing. And so it's really just the only way I could do it. I could show you samples of me trying to be, I don't know, Neil Adams or whoever the hell I was trying to channel, and I just couldn't do it. My stuff always just looked, crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we get
Disturbing,
disturbing is a great
No,
way.
that was actually an editor at DC said my work was too disturbing, is what I was told.
I don't know about too disturbing, but it's channeled in such a provocative or evocative way that, I mean, right off the bat, you get some pretty strong visuals, and you even get sources on quotes on things that are happening with like the 32 children that are, you're quoting UNICEF, and
Yeah,
you talk about your experience going to Rio, at 2025. What about that bridge, that gap that we have from your time there to the execution and the release of this book? What sort of homework did you find yourself doing to kind of help bring this story to light?
It was strange because I had worked with I worked with UNICEF originally way back, probably the early 90s, and when this was, I got a lot of information of what was going on, and the situation kept changing, but it always got worse. There's more gangs. The street gangs run the favelas. The homeless situation with the orphans and the kids living in the streets has gotten a lot worse. There's a lot of deaths. There's a lot of violence. There's these killing squads that want to eradicate these kids. So I kind of kept my ear to the ground about Rio and talked to a few people I knew that were that were from there. And then I worked with Kelsey Trotta as a gal who, it was important for me to do two versions, to do it in Portuguese and do it in English, because I wanted the comic people. There's a big grassroots comic market in Brazil that I felt it was important to do a Portuguese version for them to be able to even just get their feedback. Because I knew there was going to be some pushback. Oh, he's not Brazilian. And, I get that. That's going to happen. But everybody I talked to, it just was worse. It just continued to. But so the only thing that really changed, unfortunately, were when in the script, because my script was always going to be the same, was always going to be the three different viewpoints and all that. But when I went in, I literally had to keep changing the number in the script of how many kids were getting killed and what the statistics were. And I found the numbers were all over the place. So I had to finally just go with the official UNICEF numbers, but people feel the numbers are actually much higher than the ones that are the stats that I put in the book.
And that's some of the more troubling parts, that it gets less into the folklore mythological sense, and it hits home a little bit more. And I think your artwork helps to bring that out. And I think it is very quick to draw tears because it's so emotional.
Well, thank you. I mean, I wasn't trying to push that, or that wasn't what I was after. It was really just kind of, I always saw the hostage as the kid's dream. Like when you were a kid and you fell or you got hurt or you got your ass kicked, you always dreamed or wished bad things on whoever did it to you or whoever it was. And, that's kind of how I saw it. I didn't see it as, hey, this guy's going to come in and be Ghost Rider and make all their problems go away, or he's not going to be, Rorschach and solve these kids' problems in one night. It was always clearly meant to be a dream, and hope that the situation, it doesn't get fixed, but at least you draws light upon, hey guys, this is what's really going on. This is not a fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where a lot of the power of the story comes from, because as a reader, like, okay, this is a construct. This is not actually happening. This isn't solving anything, but it is shedding light on things. And I mean, for me, that was where really the power of the narrative, but it struck me when the hostage entered. And we actually see it on page for the Enter the Hostage, that beautiful text box from Dave Sharp, which I'd like to circle back on because I love Dave Sharp.
I got a funny story about Dave. Remind me.
I want to hear a story about Dave. He's the most metal letterer in all of comics. Like, just what a great character.
He's the best. He's the greatest.
But I mean, yeah, just that moment of seeing it. Like, I was sitting in bed last night finishing up the book. And the couple pages before that, I just looked to my wife and I was like, look at this artwork. It's ugly beautiful is the only way I could think to how to describe it.
I'll take it. No, I'll take ugly beautiful, because I usually, I've gotten, I can give you a list of what I've gotten. I mean, from editors,
It seemed so perfect because what you're depicting is so ugly in real life. And then you find a way to distort it and kind of sculpt it into something, I don't know, like fitting for what it is. And I thought it was remarkable. I really enjoyed the book.
Thank you. I really was, it was important for me to not, Americanize it, because that's kind of, and that's not a negative, but whenever I've done comic shows overseas, you see the way Europeans approach subject matter, and it's always much different than the American approach. And they're envious and they're not at the same time, because of how they call our stuff guys in tights, guys with muscles, guys in tights, and guys with the screaming mouth, And over there, I mean, over there meaning whether it's Asia or France or Germany or Italy, comics are really considered an art form. They're taken more seriously than they are here in the States. I mean, if you're in Paris or you're in France, French publishers at any given time, there's 10 to 15 cowboy graphic novels, cowboy comics that are top sellers. Where here, we've given up on the cowboy Western comic a long time ago. But with my stuff, I just felt like, look, man, I gotta kind of show it the way that I saw it and the way how raw it was. And there was a lot of photo research that I did. It's hard to look at. If you Google a lot of it, my wife would see it and she's like, my God, how do you look at that stuff? And I'm like, I have to keep reminding myself how bad it was and what really punched me in the mouth about it. You know, I couldn't unsee it when I got back. I mean, I went there this naive 25, year old college kid. And when I came back, it was just tough to carry that with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's kind of part of what I'd like to dig in with the process stuff, because you had mentioned that you looked up a lot of these pictures, and this feels like a very artist-driven book, someone who's coming from a visual perspective. And I'm curious what the scripting process was like on this, because a lot of these pages, it's kind of hard for me to imagine sitting down at a document and saying page 1, panel 1 is going to be this, and here's the dialogue.
Yeah.
They don't need to operate by those rules. I want to see if you could talk to us a little bit about the writing process of this.
I work old school, like kind of the Stanley Kirby way, where I draw the whole thing first.
Okay.
I lay it all out and I storyboard it all out. And I make a lot of notes on the sides. I make a lot of notes of what's going on. And then as I go, I'll change things and I'll add things. Originally, when I worked on Atomica, I worked with Andrew Dabb, and he's a really good writer. And he kind of, we were perfect because he wrote it more like a poem than anything. It was kind of an abstract thinking kind of a script. With this one, I approached him about the subject matter. He liked it. We talked about it, 10 years ago. And then we couldn't get together on it. And it was too important for me to wait or to collaborate or for you to tell me, yeah, Sal, it's good, but I need 3 months. And I understood that, but I thought, man, I gotta go. And then as I started to lay it out, because I never thought of myself as a writer at all, because the worst mistake you can make is when you're an artist and you think you're a writer and then you're terrible and nobody wants to tell you. But I had to go. I had to move forward. I had to plow through it. So I based 99% of it on just my notes of what they're saying and what they got and what's in their head and the point of view where they're coming from. And I wanted to sauce it up a little more, but I let Alex Ross read it, and he had a great piece of advice with Sal. You might want to just tone down some of the language because then it's an easier read for everybody. Whereas if you add profanity, and I didn't add profanity just for the sake of adding profanity, but there were some scenes where there were a few, sharp words. And then I thought, okay, I'll take them out and I'll reword it just so that it could reach a broader audience and not have to warn people about, hey, there's some profanity in it. So that were really the only changes I made. I don't know if that answered.
I would like to circle back to this funny story about Dave Sharp. I would like to make sure that we don't miss this.
Yeah, Dave. Anybody who doesn't know Dave, and Dave was like the radio DJ that you've known your whole life and you've never seen what he looks like. Okay, so I knew Dave just from the internet. I forget how we were introduced. I think I approached somebody about lettering Atomica. And he couldn't do it, but he said, hey, I got this great guy, Dave. So I said, sure, and I didn't, I'm a small press guy, so I'm not real big on, I'm going to need to see a resume or whatever. I mean, but we started talking on the internet, and then we talked on the phone, and it worked out great. And Dave is he's a no bullshit guy. He's straight to it. What do you want? And he's like, he had kids like I did, and I never met him. I'd only talked to him on the phone and I never saw him. I had no idea what he looked like. And I'm at Comic-Con, about 9 years ago. And the guy that I would work in the Alex Ross booth with comes to me and he goes, hey man, there's this guy here that's looking for you and you need to talk to him. And I go, who is he? What's his name? He goes, I don't know, man. He's like the guy from American Chopper is here to see you. And I go, what do you? And I look, and there, you know, right? He's basically Lobo, is what Dave looks like. He's a bigger version of Lobo. And I'm looking, and I'm going, in my mind, I'm thinking now, who do I owe money to? Who did I piss off? You know, I'm going through the list in my head of how am I going to get away from this guy who's going to, you know, he's got the chain and he's got the leather vest with no sleeves. He looks like one of the warriors. And I said, okay. And I walk over and I'm like, can I help you? And then the voice comes out of the guy I knew on the phone. And he's like, Sal, you know, it's Dave. And I'm like, Dave. And I didn't make the connection because I expected this little computer guy who does lettering, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, I was so relieved that I wasn't going to get my ass kicked that I forgot what I was going to ask him about the lettering. I was just so like, oh my God. And then from then on, we see each other at cons and, hey, how's the family and how's the kids? And his kids are all grown up now. And at the time they were little. But so when this came along, I was like, hey man, we haven't spoken in a long time, but I really, really would like you to work on the hostage. He's like, let's go. And he's busier than can be now. He's like one of the top guys, I think, at DC. And so he's always working, but he fit me in and it worked out great. You know, but you don't want to give Dave too many changes, because he's good the first 3 changes. And then after about the 3rd or 4th change, you get the Sal, come on, you know. and I'm like, all right, look, Dave, only fix it if you want to fix it. Don't worry about it. If you don't feel like fixing it, don't fix it, you know. But he had to do it twice. He had to do it in Portuguese and in English, and he did a great job. And he was the first one done, by the way. I mean, he was done like that.
That's really outstanding. And like you said, how the book came together with notes on your actual illustrations. How did that process work with Dave Sharp in sending him, you know, your script along with the visual notes that helped to form the book? Were there any difficulties in translation there?
A little bit. I mean, Dave was kind of like, what's going on here? or what? You know, he's like, I don't know, Sal, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Or, you know, he's like, you got way too many well, you know, but let's put this in one block. You know, he would, and I'm like, look, Dave, that's what you do. I don't like to art direct guys who are professionals. That's why you hire a professional. The only mistake I made with the hostage, and I recommend this to anybody going into small press. If you haven't put your book together, or you're still putting your book together, or you haven't even started it, always, and it sounds super basic and stupid, but what happens is you get so caught up in your composition and what you're doing, and you see it as a page, that we never consider where the hell are the balloons going, and where the hell are the boxes going, and it's going to destroy the way the eye moves across the page, the way the panels move across the page. Because if you decide, I need to fatten up this script on this page, or I need to minimize it, like the last chapter was like that. It was way longer, or it was more information I felt I wanted to give you. But Dave is like, Sal, it looks like, you know, somebody dropped a box of Legos on this, because there were just boxes all over the place and you could barely even see the art. So I'm like, oh shit, you know, yeah, okay. So with you know, when you're working on it, keep in mind exactly what you want to, or at least a general idea of where things are going. You save yourself a lot of work, and you won't break your heart when a really cool piece or a cool part of the background that you painted and killed yourself on is just covered by a box. You know, it's covered by a word balloon or a box that has to be there. And there were some pages in the hostage that I definitely was a little heartbroken that there had to be as many boxes on, but you know, you got to do what you have to do. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, you know, the final product is fantastic. It's really great. Everything flowed really well.
Thank you. And,
And I mean,
and nobody will know. Trust me. Nobody will know. As much as you
Right.
you labor and stay up all night and redraw it 50 times, nobody knows. You know.
Right.
And John
Absolutely.
Buscema, he said he got to a part in his career where he didn't even erase things anymore. If you drew it and it didn't look right, he's like, make the next one better. You know, don't worry about it. You know, being on time, half as good on time is better than late and perfect. And but with this one, there wasn't a deadline other than I really wanted to release it over Halloween, or on October 31st was my first Kickstarter date that I was shooting for, and the world was a crazy place in October. You remember. And then there was the election a week after, and then there was the after the election, and then there was Black Friday, and it just kept every week was like, oh, Sal, you don't want to do it this week. There's fill in the blank, and you don't want to do it. So I'm like, well, I waited 10 years or more. I mean, almost 20 years to do this. Couple of weeks, couple of months isn't going to kill me. So I was like, fine. And now I'm glad I waited, until all the election and all the craziness and all the, the riots and everything are over with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a success already. The book's been funded after being out for a day. Just congratulations for that. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't, and when you approach it, people are like, well, what's your goal? And I said, guys, 1,000% of the goal was to cover the cost of printing it, and that's it. I don't know when people pad stuff or whatever their objectives are when they give you a number on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
This was just like, okay, we're gonna print this thing, because when you do small press, it can be a little disheartening, because there used to be only one model two models to do small press. Go to a con and pimp it yourself. Set up an artist alley, meet the fans one-on-one. But that's very, you're not going to make a lot of traction that way, because, artist alley has become kind of, unfortunately, fodder for a lot of other things. Deflect from artist alley, cosplay and signatures, and the Walking Dead guy is here, and the guy from Planet of the Apes is over here, and Tootie from Facts of Life is signing, at the table down from you. And there's a million reasons why whenever people go to a con, I go, guys, go to Artist Alley, spend some money, indie comics, buy some comics. You don't even just buy comics when you go to a con. And then the other way was to go through Diamond, whereas you put an ad in the catalog, the previous catalog, and then you just wait. And you don't have any control over the orders after that. Now, at least with social media and with Kickstarter and with, the other way, streams of getting information out, websites and Facebook and everything, you can at least bang the drum more, because it's your baby. And at the end of the day, no one gives a shit about it as much as you do. No one has their blood on those pages as much as I do. So, as much as people care, even your relatives, they don't care about it as much as you do. A lot of people are nice because they go, wow, it looks great, but at the end of the day, you better really, really give a shit, because a lot of people, they're going to say they do. And trust me, they don't as much as you do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's pretty obvious that you give a lot of shit about this book, because even the Kickstarter page looks great. You've got videos, you've got a lot of different add-ons, stretch goals, there's some cool stuff happening. And before we got on here, you mentioned that you really weren't much of a digital comics reader, and this is a very digital process that promoting and making sure it's published and doing the whole indie comics run on it. So I want to see if you could talk a little bit about that process of Kickstarter and how it worked for you coming over to a process like this that's so digital influenced.
It's perfect for if you're an indie person, if you're an indie comics creator. Kickstarter's perfect, because Kickstarter, I think, has changed a lot. I mean, even from my perception, the perception of a lot of people at the beginning of Kickstarter was it was begging. You were basically asking for money. I mean, plain and simple. That was the unfortunate knock of Kickstarter at the beginning. As time progressed, you ran into other problems where a lot of programs and campaigns were not getting fulfilled. Me included. I was one of those guys. I used to back a lot of stuff or a few projects on Kickstarter. I never saw the project. I don't know what happened. I don't know if people order fulfillment is a huge part of Kickstarter. You're not going to get a second chance if you screw this up. If I get on here and I get you to give me a benefit of the doubt and buy the hostage, and you never get it, that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because that's your credit card and your money. But when I started this, I just felt like, one, the comic stores are very erratic. I don't know how they are where you guys. I think you're in Texas or where you're at, but here in Illinois, a lot of the comic stores are gone, and then now with COVID, a lot of them are closed. So you can't do face-to-faces. You can't go talk to the owners and get them to pick your book. So I was really a little gun shy about Kickstarter, because I wasn't sure if, it was the right fit for me, because I just was uncomfortable. You're going out there and you're asking people to, you're asking for favors, and you really got to kind of put your ego aside for your project, for your baby. But you'll do anything for your kids. You know what I mean? You'll do things for your kids you wouldn't even do for yourself. You'll embarrass yourself for your kids, but you won't embarrass But I also thought I started to watch what some people were doing. I saw what Todd McFarlane was doing. I saw what Polito was doing. I saw what Boom was doing, Boom Studios, and I said, this is really cool, because you could talk to the audience. You at least have that kind of, you could do what you do at a con, where I could sit and talk to you, and I could feel, hey, how do you feel about stuff? And we could talk about comics, and I can ask you questions, and you can go back and you could see the book, or at least test it to look at some of the pages to see whether, you remember when we bought comics when we were young, you flipped a little bit and you knew in the first 3 pages whether you're like, I don't want it, or yeah, this is cool, I'm going to give it a shot. But when I started Kickstarter, I had no idea it was the amount of work it was. Everybody warned me. They're like, Sal, it's a lot of work. And I thought, yeah, right. What do they know? And then you get into it and you realize, if you want to do a good job and you really want to look professional, then you've got to plan it out. You really have to sit down and come together with the idea that it's like, yeah, this is not halfway. It's not sort of, kind of, because I looked at a lot of pages, and I looked more at the bad pages than I looked at the good ones. You look at Boom. I mean, they got Keanu Reeves on there. Well, of course, everybody's going to go, hey, Keanu Reeves, who was I going to get? Was I going to get Ron Jeremy, to come on my page? I couldn't afford a celebrity to come on and pimp the hostage. So, or I looked at what Todd McFarlane did, where he was just very genuine. Or Brian Polito's a perfect example of a guy who just gets on there and he just talks to you man to man, and says, hey guys, this is what it is. And he's talking to his fan base. So I really like that about Kickstarter. But then you have to start at the beginning, which is like, where do I start with this? And it's a good idea to kind of swallow your ego and just ask a lot of questions of people who have done it. And so I called up Frank over at Aspen Comics. He's a great guy. And he gave me a lot of advice, because the Aspen campaigns are doing really well because they work really hard on them. He gave me a lot of great advice. Jimmy Palmiotti, was another guy who, did a lot of successful Kickstarter. So you should always customize it to you, of course, but there's a lot of shit you got to do that you're like, really, I got to do that? But you don't have to do it, but if you want to be successful at it, then you have to do it. You have to really kind of swallow your pride a little bit and do a lot of things.
Well, it seems like it worked out for you in the end, and I mean, what a great group of people to be able to reach out to too, like Frank over at Aspen and.
Well, Frank, I know Frank over the years, because we've set up across from each other at Comic-Con for a long time. And we never really used to talk business. We used to just shoot the shit a lot. And then when I saw, if you're going to do Kickstarter, go on Kickstarter and look at the successful campaigns and just see what they're doing. and not necessarily do everything they're doing, but just kind of take what applies to you and use it for your campaign. And then also look at some bad ones. There's some bad ones, and they're bad because they're lazy. They're not bad because they don't know what they're doing. They're bad because either A, they don't give a shit, or B, and I'm not going to mention any names, they're such a big name that they figure, oh, I'm such and such. You're gonna back it no matter. And then some of those come across exactly what they are. They're just, we got a lot of stuff here that we couldn't sell, so let's put it on Kickstarter. I got to clean out my warehouse. Let's put it on Kickstarter, and I'll do a doodle for you on the side of it, and call it a stretch goal. You know, it's not like they got this book they have to, get out there. But for me, I knew, like, look, the Hostage was not going to get picked up by a publisher. I had no delusions. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe next year I could find a publisher in Brazil or, overseas. I would love to publish it hopefully I don't know much about the comic market in Brazil. I know it's big. I know they have big shows and things like that, but I would love to publish it overseas. But I'm not waiting for the doorbell to ring for a publisher to go, Sal, this is, my God, your art, it's not as disturbing as we thought it was. I live in the real world, and I got some friends of mine that are editors, and I'm smart enough to not even show it to them, because I don't want them to have to lie to me. I don't want them to put them in the situation where they got to go, oh man, it's like borrowing money. You never get no, you get excuses. You get, he's in a meeting, or, oh, I fell and hurt myself. They never just say no. It's always some bullshit. It's the same with editors. Anything other than yes, we love it, we'll print it, is no. It's, so, Alex was like, hey, maybe you should show it to such, and I'm like, bad idea.
Oh.
Bad idea, because now, you're not going to admit it, but now you're pissed at the guy. Now you're like, he didn't want my book. It's like he told you, it's like he killed your canary. You're like, shit, we were friends for 20 years and now he doesn't like my book. So I learned, if I'm not invited to the party, I don't show up at the party.
That's pretty interesting. That was going to be my next question. You had a lot of starts and stops with this. There was never a time where you had a pitch for the Hostage that you wanted to give to, any publisher or anything like that. You never really tried to make that case for the book.
Yeah, no, I learned with Atomica.
Yeah,
I learned a lot of what not to do with Atomica. And when I put Atomica out, I started with a small publisher, Speakeasy, in Canada. And it starts out, like when you first get married, it's all, yeah, hey, honey, and it's chase me, and all. And then 3 years later, it's like, what? When you ask a question. And that's how it is with publishers, where it starts out where you're their golden boy, and then 3 issues in, it's not the same story. So the way the world changes, and I tell this to every artist that I talk to, just do it yourself. Because, and I know that a lot of guys don't want to hear that, and I didn't want to hear it, because you want to go in the front door. You want the validation of Marvel going, yes, you're, or DC going, yeah, we all want to, in our mind's eye, have those characters that we want to. But if you really, really want to get into comics, you just do it yourself. You find a way and publish it yourself. It's not like it used to be. You can make a run of 100 or 50 or 250 or whatever the hell it is. Now, selling it is another story, because you're going to have to get out there and you're really going to have to hustle, because indie comics are like indie anything. It's tough. But you have to just decide, hey, this is cool. But with Atomica, I was like, what are these publishers doing for you again? Unless it's Image, or unless it's, a big publisher who's like at the book shows and at all the cons and really getting out there and publishing, and getting you circulation. A lot of those small publishers, they don't really do a shitload for you. And a lot of times they don't even publish the damn book. They look at it and they go, we really like it, but then now they have to put down a lot of money to actually publish it. You actually pay the printer. So a lot of them, it doesn't see press. So I learned with Atomica that it's like, just do it yourself. And you'll learn more in working with guys like Dave, where you have the fear of death when you got to call the letterer, you know, getting rid of guys. A lot of the reason that I did way more on the hostage than I did on Atomica was that you get sick and tired of becoming Mr. Weatherby from the Archies, you know, the high school principal, when they give you bullshit excuses why they're late and why they missed their deadline and why, where's the pages, you know, where's the damn pages, you know, and you get a list of excuses from, you know, you can't believe the bullshit people give you when, and then you wind up going, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself, because I'm sick and tired of the aggravation and the frustration of it starts to be, just do it yourself. And so some of that is just from desperation. And then a lot of it comes from just, I want to put this thing out, man. You know, I want to get it out there. So would I would have liked to work with publishers? Yeah, but I had no delusions about my work. And I based that evidence off of hundreds, excuse me, of portfolio reviews and meetings I had with editors. I stood in every one of those lines at New York and Comic-Con and Charlotte and Motor City and MegaCon. I mean, you name a con, and I was walking around with my portfolio. And I talked to Dark Horse and I talked to Top Cow and hundreds of publishers that don't even exist anymore. You know, guys that are selling storm windows told me that I couldn't draw. You know, guys that have never written or drawn a book in their life were telling me that I should become a plumber. You know, or are you sure you're not the guy from The Sopranos? Bullshit, you know, that I heard. But, you know, where are they now? You know, what are they doing? So, you know, the other thing I learned from that is show your work to good people. Don't show your work to a bunch of jagoffs, because you're going to show your work to people that don't know what they're talking about, you know, that think Domino's is the greatest pizza in the world. And you're like, it is, you know, and they don't know but you go, oh, okay, that tells me a lot about what you know about pizza. And then when you ask them who their 10 favorite artists are, it tells you everything you need to know. So, you know, do it yourself. And I know it sounds like heavy lifting, but it's really not, if you love what you're doing and you have to get your book out. You know, do it yourself.
Well, it's very clear that you did love what you were doing and that the heavy lifting was worth it. We appreciate you sharing the book with us. I think we should probably wrap up now. It's running a little bit long. But
I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, you guys, you should have just said shut up. I'm sorry.
No, we love it. We
We'll
love
go
it.
all day.
We're passionate.
My wife's always like, why do you got to guido it up and run on? And the guys are probably being nice and they're fantasizing about when they can get their lives back when you shut up. You know?
No, not at all. Like we're very passionate, and we appreciate people that are also very passionate about comics. Yeah. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. And I tell whether you like it or you don't like it, I guarantee the hostage is not like anything you've seen before. So
damn straight.
You know, take a look at it, and I hope you give it a shot.
Yeah.
So there you go. The Kickstarter is live now. It's called The Hostage. Author and artist Sal Abbinanti.
Perfect. Wow.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.